So the thing that it makes me think about there is intellectual humility and how tightly people hold on to their beliefs, that if you believe that you are always going to be right, that there is nothing to learn outside of you, and that any kind of admission that you might be wrong is tantamount to destruction, it does exactly the same thing. You need to, and it goes back to asking stupid questions, being prepared to ask the stupid questions and look not like the most informed person in the room, but also importantly, nowhere near the most stupid person in the room, because you're the one that's asking the question.
Well, the stupidest person in the room is the person who doesn't know and won't ask. Or even worse, who doesn't know and won't ask and acts like they know.
Yeah.
That's not good at all. Yeah.
There's from your...
See, that's part of that idea that you should love your enemy. So you might say, well, why should you do that? Well, your enemy is going to be your harshest critic. Now, it's possible that if you have a very good enemy, that he will show you flaws in your character that you didn't know were there. And so it's a very strange way of looking at the world, to think that you should welcome an attack. But this is right. I'm saying that with all due caution, let's say. The more vicious the attack, the more of your potential hidden flaws might be revealed.
Have you found that to be true?
Oh, definitely. But I've also found that attacks force you to contend with it, to see if it's there, right? To test it. I suppose the attacks that have come after me that have been most successful, they're almost always journalists. And they're usually British female journalists, but not always.
We produce a nation of hard-hitting journalists.
Yeah, well, and faith in journalists is the lowest in the UK and anywhere in the Western world. And I can see why, but there's some advantage. There's some real advantage to facing someone. It's a Pharisee problem. In the Gospels, Christ was always contending with these Pharisees. And what the Pharisees were always trying to do was to lay a verbal trap for him. So
is a Pharisee a person?
Pharisee was a Jewish sect.
Okay.
And the Pharisees were very legalistic in their interpretation of Mosaic law. And so they were hypocritical, the way they're portrayed in the Gospels. And they're hypocritical by the book moralists. And most of their morality was for show. They liked to pray in public. They liked to be seen being holy. At least that's the criticisms that are levied against them. And what they're always trying to do in the gospel accounts is to lay a verbal trap for Christ so that they can expose him as a heretic and kill him, right? So every single thing they say is a snare of some sort. And there's lots of journalists like that. Nellie Bowles, who wrote an article about me for the New York Times, which was a very devastating article in many ways and very serpentine and subtle. 3 years later, she wrote another article about what it was like to work for the New York Times when she was working there and the tricks that the journalists played, including her. And she said that the game was to devastate someone else's reputation in the attempt to boost yours, right? So you could think about it as a game of comparative moral standing. So the journalist's trick is to trick you into saying something that will end your career, essentially.
Their social status stands on the shoulders of yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so now the advantage to being in a situation like that is that you have to if you step extremely carefully, and you're fortunate, then you evade the traps, and then the interview tilts hard in your favor.
Yeah.
And so the interviews that have done me the most good in the long run were the 2 interviews that were most hostile. One by Channels 4,
Griffin,
Kathy Newman.
Kathy Griffin.
And Kathy at least had a sense of humor. Another one by Helen Lewis, who had no sense of humor at all and doesn't seem to have learned anything at all in the interim. But I think that one has 80 million views now, twice as many as the Kathy Newman interview. Like, it just keeps racking up views. And it was because Helen Lewis, she has like 50 tricks or 100 tricks. Kathy had like 4, and they were pretty blunt. And she had a sense of humor about them. But Helen Lewis, she was just all tricks, and lots of them, and smart, and it's quite something to talk to someone who's quite smart and quite educated, but all tricks. And so, but
how does it feel looking back on those two? They were a very formative time. It was kind of the inflection point, or one of the inflection points, I suppose, for yourself as well.
Yeah.
How does it feel looking back on that? I remember you said at the time it took you many days to recover from that kind of cantankerous sort of adversarial interview. Does that seem like a different lifetime, or is that still very much sort of with you?
Well, I'm a lot healthier than I was then. So those sorts of things wouldn't have the same effect on me now as they did then. Because I was ill, it took me a long time to recover from, a serious bout. I mean, the first time I talked to Sam Harris, not that Sam played tricks, I like Sam and we've had very productive conversations. I was so ill when the first time I talked to Sam that I could barely sit in my chair.
Talking to Sam Harris makes you ill. That's the
No, not at all. No. Sam and I have had very productive conversations. That was another good example, I suppose, of the utility of an adversarial conversation.
Yeah.
Sam comes to a conversation like that pretty well armed, but it's very helpful because it forces you to look in nooks and crannies that you might not have looked in, and to be crystal clear to the degree that that's possible about what you're actually saying.
The idea of loving your enemy is something I've been playing with a little bit recently. There's been, I guess, my platform's getting to the level now where there's a reason for someone to have a bullseye pointed at least remotely in my direction.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in trying to take somebody down that's got no status. Why would you invest the time?
Right.
The step that you're going to get in terms of your status standing on their shoulders is so small that no one can notice.
Right, so it's a backhanded compliment.
In some ways.
Yeah.
But you're right, man. Some of the criticisms that I've gotten, I was reminded by a friend recently about this, have been some of the best inflection points, very uncomfortable. And to see it as a gift, to think about that thing as a gift, it's like, I know that you weren't doing this to make me better.
Yeah.
I know that you weren't doing this to try and benefit me. And yet,
yeah.
In reflection, it's like alchemy. It's like how Rory Sutherland calls it alchemy, taking something that was bad. I had this reflection as well.
We've learned, my family's learned, like when a public attack occurs, there's a massive opportunity nested in it. If you can reorient, it's like, okay, this is bad. This is vicious. This does not look good. And maybe it could take me out, take us out. Is there a way we can play with this that will not only neutralize it, but twist it in the other direction? I think the thing we did that was most effective on that side of things was when I was written into Captain America as
I spoke to you that day.
Red Skull.
I spoke to you that day that it happened.
Yeah.
The magical
super Nazi,
floating Nazi or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it was shocking, right? It was very shocking.
And then Olivia Wilde.
Yeah, that was shocking too.
Yeah. There's a litany of
yes. Well, and it became increasingly preposterous, and the Olivia Wilde episode was one of the. That was so preposterous that it was almost immediately laughable.
I think mercifully that film was so badly made, and I'm pretty sure that she'd cast her boyfriend as got rid of someone that was super competent and put somebody in that was pretty incompetent. And I think that kind of caused it to flub. But yeah, man, the enemy thing, I've ended up becoming really good friends with one of my harshest critics. It's so strange, and yet makes complete sense afterward. We'll get back to talking to Jorden in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Maui Nui venison. Maui Nui venison is the most protein-dense and nutrient-dense red meat on the planet. Thank you. Plus, they're the only stress-free, 100% wild harvested meat available. My favorite method for cooking it is straight from frozen, salt the hell out of both sides, 12 minutes in an air fryer at maximum temperature, turn it over, 12 minutes again, and it is perfect every single time. It is such a life hack, actually taught to me by Jordan's daughter, Michaela, and all she does is eat meat, so that's the way to do it. All of the cuts are spectacular, but their venison sticks have been my new favorite while I've been traveling on the road. You can get the healthiest red meat on the planet delivered directly to your door by following the link in the show notes below or going to mauinuivenison.com/modernwisdom and using the code modernwisdom at checkout. That's 20% off by going to mauinuivenison.com/modernwisdom and modernwisdom at checkout. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Jorden, you will love the over 3-hour-long podcast episode, which is available right here. Go on. Give it a tap.